Michael, honey, come sit with family, Diane called out, her voice carrying that familiar tone of false sweetness she reserved for public displays. My stepmother of 8 years had perfected the art of looking caring while systematically destroying any relationship I might have had with my father. I shook my head politely, staying in my position near the wall. The last time I tried to sit with family, she'd made a scene about how I was taking up space meant for people who actually mattered. That was Christmas 2 years ago, the last holiday I'd been invited to. After the service, as people gathered in the fellowship hall picking at store-bought sandwiches, Diane cornered me near the coffee station. Her makeup was flawless despite her tears, and her black dress probably cost more than most people's rent. "I suppose you expect something now," she said, her voice low enough that nearby mourners couldn't hear. "Some handout from your father's estate." "I'm not here for money, Diane." I poured myself coffee with steady hands, though my chest felt tight with familiar pain. "I'm here to say goodbye to my dad." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your dad? Michael, he stopped being your dad the day you dropped out of that community college program. Do you know how embarrassed he was, telling people his son was a quitter?" The coffee burned my throat as I swallowed, but I didn't respond. There was no point in explaining that I'd left community college because I'd been accepted to Northwestern Law on a full scholarship. Diane had never cared about the truth. "You'll never amount to anything," she continued, her voice gaining strength from my silence. "Just like your mother. All dreams, no follow-through." At least she had the decency to die before she could disappoint him further. My hand tightened around the coffee cup, but I kept my expression neutral. Mentioning my mother, who died when I was 12, was Diane's favorite way to twist the knife. "I should go," I said quietly. "Yes, you should. And don't bother coming around looking for handouts. Everything goes to someone who actually contributed to this family." She smoothed her dress with satisfaction. "My nephew Derek is getting the house. He's in medical school, you know. Someone who actually makes his family proud." I nodded and walked away, leaving her standing there with her triumphant smile. What Diane didn't know, what she'd never bothered to learn, was that I'd been supporting myself since I was 16. While she'd been convincing my father that I was a failure, I'd been working my way through law school and building a practice that specialized in family law and estate planning. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who'd spent years calling me worthless had no idea she'd been living off my father's improved finances. The legal advice I'd quietly provided him through a third-party contact, the investment strategies I'd suggested through mutual friends, none of it traced back to me. I'd wanted to help my father without giving Diane ammunition to use against me. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was reviewing case files in my downtown office when my assistant Janet knocked on the door. "There's a Diane Hartwell here to see you," she said, her eyebrows raised. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent regarding her late husband's estate." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Send her in." Diane swept into my office like she owned the building, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hands. She'd clearly done her research on the law firm. Hartwell, Morrison and Associates had a reputation for handling high-net-worth divorces and complex estate disputes. "Mr. Morrison," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. "I need the best lawyer in the city and everyone says that's you." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She looked older than she had at the funeral, stress evident in the tight lines around her eyes. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Hartwell?" "It's about my late husband's estate. There are some complications." She opened her purse and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "My stepson is contesting the will. He claims there was undue influence, that I manipulated my husband into leaving everything to my nephew instead of him." "I see." I picked up my pen, a Mont Blanc my father had given me for my 16th birthday, back when Diane was still pretending to like me. "And what evidence does your stepson have for these claims?" Diane's face flushed. "None. He's just bitter because he threw his life away and now wants to blame everyone else. He dropped out of college, you know. Never held a real job. My husband was so disappointed in him." "What's your stepson's name?" "Michael Morrison. He's a nobody, probably working some dead-end job and looking for easy money." She laughed bitterly. "He actually had the nerve to show up at the funeral acting like he belonged there." I set down my pen carefully, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need to ask you something important. In your marriage to your late husband, was there a prenuptial agreement?" Yes, of course. Gerald insisted on it. She waved her hand dismissively. But that was 12 years ago. Surely it doesn't matter now. Actually, it matters quite a bit. Do you have a copy of the prenuptial agreement? Diane fumbled through her folder, finally producing a legal document I recognized immediately. I'd helped draft it through an intermediary when my father had confided his concerns about Diane's spending habits to his golf partner, who happened to be my law school mentor. Mrs. Hartwell, I said slowly, this prenuptial agreement contains a very specific clause about inheritance distribution. Did you read it carefully before signing? My lawyer read it. Something about protecting both parties' interests. She shifted uncomfortably. Why? What does that have to do with anything? I pulled out the relevant section, highlighting it with my finger. According to this clause, if your late husband's biological children contest the will on grounds of undue influence or manipulation, the estate distribution defaults to the original terms outlined in your husband's first will, the one written before your marriage. The color drained from Diane's face. That's impossible. My lawyer would have told me. Your lawyer at the time was Harold Brennan, correct? I checked the signature page. Mr. Brennan was actually representing both you and your husband in this matter, which created a conflict of interest. This prenuptial agreement is legally vulnerable to challenge on those grounds alone. Diane stared at the document as if it might catch fire in her hands. But the will. Derek was supposed to inherit everything. The house, the investments, the business. Will likely be distributed according to your husband's original will, assuming your stepson's legal team can prove their case. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. Mrs. Hartwell, did you encourage your husband to disinherit his biological son? That's not, he made his own decisions. Because if there's evidence of manipulation or systematic alienation of a biological child, this case becomes much more complex. The court will look at patterns of behavior, documented instances of interference with the father-child relationship, and evidence of emotional manipulation. Diane's hands were shaking now. How much will this cost? I need the best representation money can buy. Whatever it takes. I stood up slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the city. 12 years of watching this woman poison my relationship with my father. 12 years of being called a failure, a disappointment, a burden. 12 years of staying silent while she convinced the man who'd once been proud of me that I wasn't worth his time or love. Mrs. Hartwell, I said, turning back to face her. I'm going to be completely honest with you about your legal position. Yes, please. I need to know exactly what I'm facing. You're facing a case against Michael Morrison, who graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern Law School and has spent the past 8 years building one of the most successful family law practices in the state. I walked back to my desk, picking up a framed photo of my father and me from my high school graduation, the last picture we'd taken together before Diane entered our lives. He specializes in estate disputes involving parental alienation and has never lost a case involving prenuptial agreement challenges. Diane stared at me blankly for a moment, then looked at the nameplate on my desk. Michael Morrison Askew, senior partner. No, she whispered, her face going white. No, that's impossible. You can't be. The community college dropout who never amounted to anything? I sat back down, my voice steady and professional. The disappointment who embarrassed his father? The nobody working a dead-end job. She tried to speak but no words came out. Mrs. Hartwell, I've been practicing law for 8 years. I graduated third in my class from Northwestern, passed the bar on my first attempt, and opened this firm when I was 26. I gestured around my office with its floor-to-ceiling law books and framed degrees. I've been financially independent since I was 18, and I've been quietly helping my father with legal and financial advice through mutual contacts for the past 5 years. Diane's breathing was becoming shallow, her designer handbag clutched to her chest like armor. The investment portfolio that allowed your husband to buy you that Mercedes? My recommendation. The refinancing that paid for your kitchen renovation? My legal work arranged through a third party. The tax strategies that saved your household $30,000 last year? Also mine. But he never said. Because you made it clear from day one that I wasn't welcome in his life unless I was someone you could control and diminish. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder labeled Morrison Estate. Did you know your husband tried to contact me 4 times in the past 2 years? He called my office directly, but you intercepted the messages and told him I was too busy to return his calls. Diane's face crumpled. I was protecting him. You would have just disappointed him again. No, Mrs. Hartwell. You were protecting your control over his estate and his relationships. I opened the folder, revealing years of documentation. I have records of every intercepted call, every cancelled invitation, every lie you told him about my life and career. I have witness statements from family friends who wanted to reconnect us but were discouraged by you. I have evidence of systematic parental alienation spanning 8 years. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I can pay you. Whatever you want. Just make this go away. I'm afraid that's impossible. You see, I can't represent you in this case because I have a conflict of interest. I stood up and walked to the door, opening it for her. I'm the Michael Morrison who's contesting the will. But you can't do this. I'll fight you. I'll hire the best lawyers in the city. You're welcome to try. But Mrs. Hartwell, you should know that most of the best family law attorneys in this city either work for me or consider me a colleague. The few who might take your case will charge you at least $200,000 up front, and frankly your legal position is indefensible. Diane stumbled to her feet, gathering her documents with shaking hands. At the door she turned back one more time. He loved me. Gerald loved me more than he ever loved you. Maybe he did, I said quietly. But love built on lies and manipulation isn't really love, is it? It's just control dressed up as affection. After she left, I sat alone in my office as afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows. On my desk was a letter I'd found among my father's papers. A letter he'd written to me but never sent, dated just 6 months before his death. Michael, I know I haven't been the father you deserved. I let my pride and my fear of admitting mistakes keep us apart. I'm proud of the man you've become even though I had nothing to do with it. I hope someday you can forgive a foolish old man who let the wrong person convince him that love meant choosing sides. 3 months later, the estate case was settled out of court. The prenuptial agreement was invalidated due to conflict of interest and inadequate representation. My father's original will was reinstated, leaving me the house, the business, and the majority of his assets. Diane received the minimum required by state law for surviving spouses. Enough to live comfortably, but not the fortune she'd expected. Derek, her nephew, contested the settlement briefly but dropped his claim when he learned about the evidence of his aunt's manipulation. It turned out he'd been just as much a victim of her schemes as I had been, pressured into playing a role in her plan to control the family. I kept the house but donated most of the furnishings to charity. In my father's home office, I found a box hidden behind legal files. A box containing every article about my law school achievements, every newspaper mention of my cases, every professional award I'd received. He'd been following my career all along, collecting evidence of the success that Diane had convinced him didn't exist.